going to teach you how to play the famous Octave Etude by Chopin, Opus 25, number 10. As I mentioned in the previous episode, the butterfly etude is actually an etude for octave, but it's for the other types of octave playing, which is leggero, light octave playing. But most of the time, I think more than 90% of the time, when we encounter double octaves that covers 4 notes, more than half of the keyboard range, it's for like big sound, deep sound, and glorious atmosphere. Like in Tchaikovsky concerto, in Rachmaninoff concerto, Brahms concerto, most of the time. But however, this octave etude covers most aspects of the octave playing, right? It's very fast, and then also the singing very slow. The only kind that this does not cover is the same octave technique that people have to apply to the Hungarian Rhapsody number 6. That is the repeated octave on the same note. Huh? And as I mentioned before, not even a repeated single note that Chopin likes to write. In his pieces, you can very rarely find a repeated technical difficulty for like a note more than three times. But we can learn from how do we play repeated octave, because there's one thing that our students rarely think of is the position of the key, like where exactly do we land our fingers on the key, which part of the keyboard do we land our fingers on. And when we have repeated octaves, I would always encourage my student to explore the possibilities of landing on the different spots. Like you're landing basically forward, and sometimes going backward works in certain passages, but yeah, look, my pinky actually is going forward, and that helps with the relaxation of the arm, that helps with the clarity. And here we might also apply that in some places, or just be aware of what's the most comfortable spot for us to land our fingers on to have this powerful, fast, and accurate. Okay, first of all, before we start this piece, I would like to share my experience playing octaves. First of all, the most important aspect of playing octaves is relaxation. And that's the most common problem I encounter when I teach students. Like they can play a couple, but then after they got tense, and then everything goes south when you start to tense yourself, you lose the accuracy, you lose the power, you also lose the speed. So the first thing I teach my students to play octaves is to play one by one, but very closely watch how our arm works. When we play one, we put all the weight down to the very bottom of the key, and then we relax. Yeah? So we should see the motion of our elbow, our arm, playing downward, and then relax. And with octave playing, it's very, very helpful mentally and technically to think that our fingers is an extension of our arms, right? We can have, this is no other better ways of applying this concept than playing octaves. So this is not mostly a work of our fingers, but a work of our arms. sure do is supports the weight. And make sure when the weight comes, like a water pipe, when the water comes, you can support this pressure, right? You're not bursting or you're not collapsing. Okay, and really watch and be very mindful of the relaxation of our arm. And here comes the next step, that to play 2 octaves with 1 up, down and up motion. Relax, relax, relax. Okay, and ultimately for this piece, I would play 3 notes with 1 motion. Okay, and of course this might take a month, right? If you do it 1 week only, and then second week you connect 2 notes, but eventually you will be able to play this with very relaxed arm. But you might ask, if I relax on the second note and the third note, how do I keep this intensity? How do I just make sure all the sounds the same, sounds consistent, instead of, well, clearly that's not what we want. And that's where the weight of our arm can help. While the motion is going up and we're trying to relax it, we put down the weight of our arm. This, I'm doing the up motion, but I'm putting, I don't know how many, maybe 10 pounds, both arms. 10 pounds is a lot to make the piano sound big. Huh? Okay, so here really comes this method that I keep applying, that of course ideally the musical phrase should be the same with the technical phrase, but a lot of the cases we cannot do that. So the technical phrase, we're splitting this into 3 notes each, while the musical phrase is much longer. Yeah? Chopin probably wrote the first legato that can cover 4 measures. I'm already taking, like, here 8 breaks, but you cannot detect because I use the weight to make up the difference. Okay, and measure 3, probably I don't know how long it takes to play the first 2 measures, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 4 seconds, but really after that you have to change the 1, 2, 3 into 1, 2, 3. So the down motion, we have to switch it from the first note to the third note. Yeah, that's really how to switch the different mode or different technique very fast. That's something we have to practice. Here, measure 5, we have that middle note, both hands D. We have to hold on to. I think, in my opinion, this makes it easier because then you have basically a bridge. You have something to hold on in order to measure for the position. The only challenge is that in order to be able to hold this, we have to have a super relaxed wrist. The wrist has to always adjust to the new position. Yeah, if the wrist is not moving, then that's not possible to play this part with the middle note held. Okay. It's okay in terms of finding the notes at the very beginning. I mean, maybe the first and half of this piece, because the good news is both hands are playing exactly the same notes for the most part. If not the same notes, it's the same direction most of the part. But here in measure 19, it's contrary motion all of a sudden. So that's also something we have to practice. We have to train both hands separately. Okay, so that we're used to having different directions suddenly within both hands. Okay, the middle section is very beautiful. Yeah, like the wrong note etude. Whenever Chopin really insert a slow section in the outer part, fast passages, and it's usually like a very touching, very moving melody. And Chopin here gave us a solution of how to connect the singing melodic line by always use a different finger on the top of the octave. Yeah, I think here it might be the editor. It's not Chopin himself, but in measure 36, 37, we have a lot of 4 to 5. So physically we're connecting. Yeah, I'm not using pedal, but I think this is a good solution, but that's not all we have to do. That's not enough. We have to consider when we want to have a singing connected legato singing line, we have to consider two things at minimum. One is the deep sound. So here, instead of the quick touch, it has to be much deeper and slower touch, even when it's piano. And secondly, we have to have the ups and downs. We have to have the undulation of the melody, right? In another term, when the melody goes up, we have to do a little crescendo. Yeah? When Chopin writes it, yes, we do it. We do it with exaggeration, but when Chopin didn't write it, we still need to do it. Yeah. Yeah. And also, the other thing that people rarely talk about is the timing. When singers sing something really high, or when the melody goes up really high, they usually expand it, make the timing a little bit fat. And when it goes down, it flows more. It's just one of the natural treatments of melodic lines for singers, and we better apply that. Because if we do everything exactly the same, it's kind of like a robot. Yeah, it's not very pretty. And here, I think that's exactly the same portamento technique that singers apply. And we have this in maybe some Schubert, in other pieces, that they threw the melody on top and then take time to drop. So this kind of like the timing when we have to make a sharp turn with our car, right? We feel that extra time during the turn, and then it goes smooth. Okay. The other thing that I want to talk about is how the key, right? This is in B minor, a very intense key. B minor Mass by Bach, B minor Sonata by Liszt. But we didn't know what the key is from the very beginning. You can call this Debussy, Richard Strauss, right? This is really not very stable. It's just chromatics moving ups and downs on the keyboard. We only know the real key from measure 5. Yeah, but as I mentioned before, chromatics are the furthest key relations, right? C and C sharp has nothing in common, has not a common note within these two keys. So here in the middle section, of course, Chopin being himself, he cannot help to have the second voice, the third voice. He cannot help to have a counter melody against this, against the main melody. And we have plenty. For instance, measure 51. We have a right hand middle voice. And this drop of minor seconds really reminds me of the B minor mass, right? Like very solo, very intense. So we have to really emphasize as I show this. And even for the left hand, he turns things into extreme chromatic movements. Yeah, in measure 83, 84, the bass line. Got to feel the pain, feel the intensity within that chromatic treatment. Okay, and of course the ending, more than half of these is exactly the same as the beginning, but here I want to mention that the last running passages, it's really quite challenging. You might not know why this is so awkward, because it's, first of all, two hands doing contrary motion, right? They don't have the same parallel motion, and also I have this belief of the right hand playing towards the right and left hand playing towards the left. It's like if you play tennis, that's the forehand. That's the more comfortable hitting position, right? The backhand is not as powerful and not as smooth. But here, both hands has the backhand playing towards inside. So somehow we have to adjust to the comfortable angle for us to play this as forte as possible while using backhand. So a lot of grouping in three and get familiar with the black and white key relations for each three note groups. But eventually that's something really not impossible to conquer. Okay, thank you for watching this episode. Next week I'm going to talk about the Winter Wind, famous Winter Wind, A minor, Opus 25, number 11. See you next week.